What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul. I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. And if you watch the channel at all, you know that the videos I make are overwhelmingly positive. And even the videos that I make where I'm just giving general information, I try to be as even-handed and informative as possible. So today's video, it's a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm going to go a little bit more negative in today's topic. But obviously I love Japan. I've been here for almost 20 years, so obviously I love the people. I love the society and culture, and I wouldn't live here if I didn't. But that being said, no place in the world is perfect. And anywhere you might live, there's going to be something that you don't particularly like. And so that is what I'm going to be addressing today. One of the things I'm not particularly fond of about Japan. Although obviously it's not enough of a deal breaker that makes me want to leave. But the title of this video will say something like, "Do Japanese hate nature?" And obviously that's way too strong a statement, and it's not true. I'm going to dial it back slightly, and I'm going to say, or ask the question, do Japanese dislike the wildness of nature? And that claim, I feel, has merit, and I'm going to be showing you and talking about some evidence. But first of all, I'm about to turn a corner here and give you the first bit of video evidence as to what I'm saying. And as I show you this, I want you to think of where you live, the country you're from, or any other place you might have lived in your life. Ask yourself, would the place you live ever do something like this? I chose to walk along this road today because this is the road that inspired me to do this video. And this is something you will see in Japan every spring. A different part of the city will get this absolute hacking prune job that turns normal looking trees into zombie trees. Now, obviously there's arguments for the pruning of bushes and trees and things as being healthy and necessary for, maintaining a garden and that kind of thing. But this is something different. Going this far on what are otherwise healthy trees is a little bit odd. If I lived in this neighborhood, I'd be slightly embarrassed about bringing people to my neighborhood. Now you can see across the street, those were done last year because they have like the little twiggly branches that have kind of reformed in the meantime since last time they were trimmed a year ago. Now, why does this happen all across Japan? Why do municipalities do this kind of trim job? And how does this relate to this idea that maybe the Japanese hate the wildness of nature? Well, I would put it this way. The same societal impulse or character that makes Japanese prefer quiet on the trains and buses and public transport also desires nature to be quiet as well, at least in and amongst where humans dwell, neighborhoods, cities, etc. And one of the big reasons or the major complaints as to why the city ends up doing this trim job is because leaves and twigs and things that might fall in the summertime or in the autumn are dirty, and they cause meiwaku or nuisance, or they're troublesome. Just like being noisy on the train causes trouble to meiwaku for others. Now, this idea of trees being dirty is not just an assumption of mine. Alex Kerr, in his book Dogs and Demons, Dark Side of Japan, which I brought along with me so I can quote if necessary, talks about a official in Kamioka, which is just north of Kyoto, who basically explains it like this. Kerr writes, most cities, including my own town near Kyoto, lop off the branches of roadside trees at the end of summer before the leaves begin to change. Obviously, it's done in the spring here. This accounts for the shadeless rows of stunted trunks lining the streets in most places. I once asked an official in Kamioka why the city continued this practice, and he replied, we have a sister city relationship with towns in Austria and China, and when we saw the beautiful shady trees on their streets, we considered stopping. But the shopkeepers and homeowners in Kamioka objected. For them, fallen leaves are dirty and messy. After receiving a number of angry telephone calls, we had no choice but to continue. And if you think sacred big trees in Japan are exempt to this, like the ones you find around Shinto shrines, those beautiful giant trees that are hundreds of years old, well, Kara writes that Shigematsu Shinji, a professor at the Graduate School of International Development at Nagoya, discovered to his surprise when he did a survey that people complained that the forests are a nuisance because the trees block the sunlight and fallen leaves from the branches heap up on the street and in front of our homes. The fallen leaves as a nuisance goes straight to the crisis of Japan's present day feelings about nature. So when even sacred old trees are complained about, you know there might be an issue. And it's not just trees. Apparently, there are a handful of complaints every year to Kyoto City about sound trucks. The trucks that go around with political slogans or go around with nationalist banner and music playing, or the ones that go around asking you to sell your appliances to them, etc. Those sound trucks are indeed a nuisance, but apparently not as much of a nuisance as the frogs in the rice paddies. Apparently there have been numerous complaints, more complaints than for the sound trucks, about the frogs croaking, and people have literally asked, please kill all the frogs. One of the Japanese ideas or sensibilities that drives this is the idea of kirei, which can mean pretty or can also mean neat and tidy. And kirei is often used to describe something modern that's been put in place, like concrete embankments and roads and bridges and that sort of thing. And this is born out of the post-war period when Japan needed to rebuild and modernize, and so the idea of changing bad roads and old rickety bridges into something new and strong and kirei, modern, is not something that we can really say is a negative. Of course it was necessary, but that attitude hasn't really changed, and so a lot of the times this use of kirei is still used to describe newly poured concrete over what was once a wild hillside. I actually saw this or heard this with my own ears when I was standing next to a coworker of my father-in-law. So this older Japanese gentleman, we were standing and looking across the street at a place where workers were cleaning up. They had just cut down all the vines and shrubberies along this concrete embankment. And my father's coworker says, kirei desu ne, sappari shimasu, sappari. And sappari is basically like, it's refreshing, or it's, again, neat and clean, tidied up. And I'm sitting there thinking, it looked much better when it was green and there was color. Now it's just a dull gray wall. How is that better? But apparently, that's better. But Paul, you say, Japan has always been famous for being at tune with nature, or that Japan's poems and art and everything shows that Japan loves nature. And I think that's true, but even going back into history, we see there's a theme of control of nature. The author Donald Ritchie, and long-time Japan lover, basically lived here a long time, came shortly after the war, and has since passed away. But if you want to look up his books, he wrote a lot of excellent books about Japan. But he once said that Japanese art is not representational, but is presentational. Meaning, if you look at things like flower arranging, bonsai, and gardens in Japan, What he means is they're not meant to be just enjoyed willy-nilly. They're placed or arranged in such a way to be enjoyed. So like flower arranging, in the West we might make a flower arrangement and put it in the middle of the table and you can enjoy it from any angle. In ikebana, or flower arranging, the arrangement has a face and you're supposed to view it from a particular angle. The same goes for most gardens. Many Japanese gardens, famous ones in Kyoto and the like, you're supposed to view them from certain places, not actually walk through them. Obviously the Zen gardens of raked gravel, etc., are not to be walked in, but they're supposed to be enjoyed from certain places. And bonsai. Bonsai are a presentational form of nature. It's a tree that's been trimmed and shaped and sculpted so that it becomes this kind of perfect representational view of nature, not wildness of nature. And Donald Ritchie also said about bonsai, he said, what's the difference between torturing a bonsai and torturing the landscape? The great Buddhist temples often have full-size trees that, through copper wiring and bamboo stilts and the like, are being shaped and sculpted into a perfect representation of a tree for display, not as something that is wild. And I think that's why, after seeing all the curated gardens of Kyoto, I always feel refreshed going to Fushimi Inari, because that's just wild Shinto. It harkens back to something more primeval and the old animism religion of Japan, where nature is just respected and left alone and is expected to be wild. Now, here I'm going to be a little even-handed and I'm going to present the argument for why this is the case and why Japan does this, why this control of nature seems to be something that is desired or necessary. And Japan is a country of natural disasters. The reason why concrete embankments are everywhere, the reason why 99.9% of the major river waterways are encased in concrete is because of floods, because of typhoons that come through and cause landslides, the heavy rains in the rainy season that cause embankments to give way and therefore are better off reinforced with concrete. So all in all, I completely understand that there is a deep generational memory in Japanese people that nature is wild and therefore to be feared and controlled wherever possible. And as such, Japan spends far more money, far more a percentage of their GDP than countries in Europe or the US in terms of laying concrete and reinforcing hillsides and rivers. I mean, the US doesn't build dams and concrete rivers anymore. That's seen as being environmentally disastrous and unfriendly. But in Japan, that's completely the norm, and that construction continues. Now, I'm not an expert about that sort of thing, and so who am I to say that the Japanese shouldn't do that kind of concrete pouring when in fact it could make the populace that much safer? I mean, I think everyone can have their opinion on that. So whether or not that sort of public works is necessary, I will say that my opinion is very strongly that these trees are not necessary. Prune them, yes, but turn them into zombies, yeah, I think that's going a little bit overboard. Sorry for the weird jump cut there, but I really wanted to add this in. I forgot to mention it before, which is there's plenty of Japanese who of course agree with me and disagree with the destruction of nature around human dwelling. Most famously, Hayao Miyazaki, who makes the Ghibli films. Like, how many of his movies have had the themes of environment destruction and respect for nature in them, like Mononoke Hime or My Neighbor Totoro or Nausicaa, those kinds of films. So obviously it's not just me, the foreigner, opinion here. So, there you have it. Nature is to be respected and feared, enjoyed where you can, but better to go out and seek it, but control it within the realms of human habitation. Let me know what you think. Do you feel like this sort of thing is justified? You can kind of tell as you watch this, I am conflicted. I understand that in a nation that experiences so many natural disasters, that the impulse to control nature is very expected and amenable. It makes perfect sense, right? However, where I push back is the idea that things that are nature, things that are green, leaves, twigs, brush, that kind of thing is dirty. That's the attitude where I disagree with many Japanese sentiment. Not all Japanese people, of course. I think there's plenty of Japanese people who look at these trees and think, wow, that's excessive. Although I think the majority don't notice it because they've grown up in a country where it's normal to do this every year, and you just see trees like this everywhere and all the time. It's only when you travel to your sister city or you travel abroad and you see the beautiful tree-lined avenues and wonder, that's really kind of pretty. But at any rate, let us know what you think in the comments, and I expect some of you will say things like, wow, if you don't like Japan, you can leave, or whatever. I would suggest that you realize that this is one small complaint in a mountain of things that I love about Japan. So with that, I want to thank you very much for watching this particular video, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.